going on, guys? It's Joe and Yuri from Wiring Specialties, and we're going to do a rundown of the RB26 Pro harness install.
What's going on, guys? So we have a couple of branches that are distinct from each other on the 26. This is the front branch. It's got the cam sensor and a couple injector connectors with the coolant and alternator connections. Routing them is very simple. We'll route the harness underneath the manifold, right behind the fuel lines, and we will position the harness length based on the cam sensor. Let's see. To the intake temperature sensor, nicely tucked, come up from underneath, and now the two coolant sensors. The one pin comes up right here, and the two pin. Go. Help the harness from underneath a little bit so wires are not strained. We're in. Nicely done. We can pull the injectors back. And we can install the grounds in the same location as the coolant sensors. Alright, finger tight. Here we have nicely tucked coolant connections, cam sensor, staying away from any rotating parts, intake temperature sensor, and our grounds. We can tighten everything up later on. Moving on to the injectors. So we have a branch that's fed right from underneath the intake manifold with the front three injectors. Longest one will reach to the back, all labeled nicely, and we will feed them through the first opening between cylinder 1 and 2. Put one in and work them in nice and easy. It's not a bad idea to do this while the engine is not in the car. Alright, we'll go underneath. A little tricky. So we've got 3, 2. Won't clip them in just yet. And number 1 is being a little bit stubborn, so we will feed it around the back for a little bit of extra length on the harness. There we go. So there are the 3 injectors, once again nicely tucked, as clean as it gets. Now, we've got 2 sub-harnesses that connect to the engine harness on the bottom of the intake manifold. The large 8-pin will be used for the mass airflow sensor and some other aftermarket gadgets. And the 6-pin is going to be used for the air regulator and the 2 NOx sensor harness. So this is the NOx sensor harness. There we go, all labeled up. You feed this backwards. Put this in. And then proceed to feed the NOx sensor in. most difficult connector to reach would be the air regulator, and it is located all the way in the back of the idle air assembly, directly underneath cylinder 3. We'll reach in there. There we go. Knock sensor 1 goes right in the back here. And the knock sensors are a little bit tough to take off, so once it's in, it's in. There we go. This can be zip tied out of the way later on. Now we're moving back. We have the idle control valve connector here, which is located right underneath the manifold, probably the easiest one to reach. We'll start with that so the harness doesn't fall anywhere. Always nice to push the pin a little bit. Listen for that click. Moving on to the throttle position and the 3 rear injectors. This is the throttle position sensor. That's actually the one that provides the computer with the throttle position voltage, and this is the idle switch. It'll tell the computer whether you're on the throttle or off the throttle to help adjust the idle. So click in, and now the 3 injectors. We can run them underneath the rail. Number 4. I'm not clicking anything in just to let things settle. Number 6 goes right at the back of the rail, and number 5 sneaks right in, same spot as number 4. So once again, we've got the 3 rear sensors, 3 rear injectors, and the throttle position sensor. Done. Has a little bit of slack. Can be all zip tied out of the way later on, but nicely cleanly installed. Last branch underneath the intake manifold would be the oil pressure sending unit, the starter signal, and the battery pickup power for the wiring specialties harness. Quick note on the oil pressure: the RB uses a 2-pin oil pressure sending unit. One wire is for the oil pressure light, the other one is for the oil pressure gauge. If you by chance have a single pin wire, that is not for the RB26. There we go, nice and easy. Nice boot right over the oil pressure sending unit. Starter loops right underneath. Obviously a lot easier with the engine outside the car, but still doable. The solenoid will also need a battery wire. There we go, solenoid on. That's it. This can be, once again, tucked in underneath, so it's away from the body, away from the heat. This is it. Very simple. And be done with the engine plug. Run the coil harness, very easy. Connectors install upside down with a clip up. Go in order. All the branches are cut to length, so you can really not plug one into the other. The longest one is number 1 in the front. The shortest one is the next one down. Tuck it in. Fights us a little bit, but should be in good shape. Now, the wiring specialties harness relocates the ignition chip to the inside of the car, so we are done. There we go, nice and clean. Out of the way. The chip must be used. For the RB26, the chip has 4 mounting holes. The RB25 has 2 mounting holes. So make sure you get the right one because they are opposite in polarity. One will not work with the other. So once again, the Wiring Specialties harness relocates the chip as well as the injector resistor into the cabin inside the car. Keep things clean and out of heat. We run heavier gauge wire on the output of the igniter chip just to make sure there's no loss in signal. Plugs right in. It does not need to be grounded. Contrary to some myths, the chip does not need to be grounded. It can be zip tied out of the way. Now, the resistor, injector resistor, labeled here on the harness, is also relocated to the inside. The stock RB injectors are low impedance, the RB26 version. They require a resistor that comes from the factory, and you should source that with your swap. Some of the aftermarket injectors we support do not use the resistor, at which point we will simply eliminate this branch for aftermarket ECUs. And that should be it for the inside. Sensor connections remaining and the mass airflow sensor connections remaining. These 2 or 4 connections will be going to sensors on the opposite side of the engine. So we'll simply lead them forward, leave a little bit of slack, and connect the mass airflow sensor at the bottom of this intake manifold on the 8-pin connector. Clicked in, feed it right through the bracket, get it out of rotating assemblies, and we'll zip tie things later on. Pretty self-explanatory. Shortest wire goes onto the shortest or the closest mass airflow sensor, which is usually in the front. The secondary one will be on the bottom. Sometimes we flip the mass airflow sensor down so that the connection is actually on the bottom, hides the wire, makes things fit a little bit better. Has a little bit of slack for you to come back here to the intake manifold and push away the connector so it's not visible to the eye. And like I said, we will zip tie these branches later on. Moving on to the O2s. Oxygen sensors that come from the factory, front and rear. They have different connectors, a 3-pin and a 4-pin. They both have factory clips on the coolant lines to hold them. This engine does not have those clips, but the Wiring Specialties harness has enough length to reach both sensors on the other side of, on the driver's side for US cars. So very simple, click it in. And we do need to get these out of heat. So even though we have high temperature nylon looming with fiberglass sleeving on the harness, we still want to get these out of the way. So if you are installing this in the car, you have brake lines on the firewall, a quick zip tie or a clip will get these out of danger zone for heat. Should be it.